What's up guys, Hunter Conestany here. Today we're talking fishing line. So fishing line is something that can be kind of confusing. There's a lot of different options out there. Like what type of line are you supposed to use for each application? Is there certain ones that are better than others? Is there certain brands that are better? There's just a lot of kind of mystery behind it, and I'm here today to help you kind of get those mysteries answer some questions, and hopefully get you guys steered in the right direction. So if you're new to my page, I make educational videos like this, as well as fun challenges on the water, tournament fishing, just kind of everything bass fishing. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button, make sure to hit that. If you're a returning viewer, thank you for returning, and I hope you enjoy this video and it is helpful to you. So without further ado, let's get into it. So to start out, I want to kind of go over what each application really is best for and specializes in, and then we'll get into some more of the weeds a little bit later down the line, what specific line sizes I like using, just kind of everything that goes with fishing line. So to start out, there's really three main types of fishing line that you're going to kind of run across on your everyday basis. There's other kinds as well, but we'll leave those out for the time being. So you got your fluorocarbon line, which is kind of the one that I use the most and what I would recommend using in a lot of situations, but not every situation. We'll get into that shortly. You have braided line, and then you have a monofilament. So the differences between it, so your braided line is going to be a lot more abrasion resistant. So I'll pull a spool out here so you can kind of see. So that's probably going to be hard to see there, but you can kind of see it's not clear like the other lines. It's a fibrous material that's basically threaded together, almost like thread for sewing, more or less. So they kind of wind it together, and that creates a very strong line. So oftentimes when we're fishing with braided line, we're fishing with maybe 50 to 65 pound line, and it's the diameter of your standard like 12 to 15 pound line. So the benefit with braid is it's drastically stronger than other lines in similar diameter. So if you're fishing really heavy cover, like flipping, punching, throwing frogs, things like that, that's really where that kind of excels. The next one, the fluorocarbon line, this is what I'm going to use, and I'd say probably 85% of applications. So fluorocarbon line has a lot less stretch than monofilament. It's more translucent in the water column, so the fish don't see it as easy, and overall it tends to be a more high quality line. So that's what I'm going to use on any kind of basically chuck and wind application, dragging bottom, really anything like that. The only downside to fluorocarbon is it sinks. So you can't use it on top waters or different applications like that, because it can mess up the bait's action, how everything moves, and kind of mess it up there. So if you have something you're throwing that you can't use sinking line for, that would be one of the few situations I don't use fluorocarbon for. But everything other than that, that's kind of going to be what you're going to want to use for the majority of your applications there. And then the last one, monofilament. This tends to be a little bit cheaper, kind of more budget friendly. Tends to be a little bit lower quality. It's not as tough as the fluorocarbon is. It's just not as good line overall, but the benefit to it is it floats. So if you're throwing top water lures, oftentimes monofilament is going to be kind of the best application for that. So to kind of get into it just a little bit deeper, so I'll go over this quickly and then we'll move on to the next thing. So braided line, when I'm going to use this, like I said, frogs, top water. So I do throw them on buzz baits a lot. If I'm throwing like a toad, I tend to throw braid on that. It works good for walking baits and different things like that as well. So because braid also floats, you can throw it on top waters, and that's kind of the one caveat where I might use it, where you could also use a monofilament and that would be fine too. Other than that, it's strictly heavy cover. So like I said, flipping, punching, frogs is really where it's going to shine. Fluorocarbon, I'm going to throw this on anything from a jig, drop shot, crankbaits. I mean, basically any kind of moving bait that isn't top water, or I'm not fishing ultra heavy cover, like throwing into like basically punching applications. I'll flip with that all day long, but if you're really getting into the thick stuff, then sometimes braid can be better. And then monofilament, pretty much the only time I'm ever going to use that is if I'm throwing top water. So if I'm throwing like a popper, walking bait, things like that, I'll throw that on monofilament. The other top waters like buzz baits, toads, things like that, I tend to throw on braid. So that pretty much sums up more or less when you would use each application. As far as certain line sizes go, I'll just name a couple main kind of staple techniques, and then you can kind of branch accordingly. So let's start off with top water and we'll kind of move deeper. So when I'm throwing top water, if I'm throwing braid, generally I'm going to throw like 50-pound braid, and that's going to work good for like my frogs, buzz baits, toads, walking baits, things like that. In certain situations, if you're fishing really heavy cover, you could bump up to 65-pound braid, but oftentimes I feel 50 works better for me. It's a little bit more limber, it's easy to cast, it just works well. Moving down in the water column, so to continue on braid, like I said, for like punching, once again, and for punching I might use 65, but 50 to 65-pound braid is going to work good for punching. To coincide with that, if you're just flipping and kind of not as heavy cover where you can get away with fluorocarbon, then I'm going to do that on anywhere from like 15 to 20. Most of the time it's going to be on 20 if I'm flipping, but just another idea there. And then for your kind of moving baits, so that can really range on the size of the bait, but if I'm throwing like square bill, swim jigs, spinner baits, chatter baits, things like that, I'm generally going to throw that on like 15-pound fluorocarbon. If I'm throwing a smaller bait, like maybe like a 1.5 crankbait, then I might bump that down to like 12, but around 15 is going to be most of the time where I'm going to kind of lean there. Moving a little bit deeper, so for throwing like your Senkos, I throw that on anywhere from usually about 10 to 14-pound line. That works pretty good for me for the most part. I'm going to dictate on which one I choose depending on how heavy the cover is, and then how clear the water is. So if the water's super clear, I'm generally going to kind of gravitate more towards that 10-pound line. If it's dirty and I'm fishing a lot of trees, I'll bump that up to 14. For like your normal like crankbaits and things like that, I actually use smaller line for crankbaits. So that can range anywhere from like 10 to 14 for your deep divers. The reason we use smaller line for that is because we want them to go a little bit deeper. So the smaller the diameter of the line is, the deeper the crankbait will go. So bumping from like 14 to 10-pound line, you might gain an extra 2 or 3 feet and be able to get that bait a little bit deeper. For some of the bottom dragging ones, so I'll try and keep this pretty quick and simple. So for your bigger bottom dragging baits, your jigs, your Carolina rigs, Texas rigs, things like that, 16-pound line is what I'm going to steer towards most of the time in like say water that's 3 feet of visibility or less. If it's more than that, where you can see further than 3 feet into the water, I'll start to kind of bump that down depending on how clear it is. And I can go as low as 10-pound line if I need to with that. I don't like to go that low if I don't have to, but generally that range is going to work pretty good. So 10 to 16, the dirtier the water, the bigger the line you can get away with. I'd use the bigger line if you can do it. If it's clear, you're going to have to downsize that, and that'll help you get more bites. And then we'll end it here. So for drop shot, I'm pretty much always going to throw like 6 to 8-pound line. When I do the drop shot, I do like using braid to leader for my spinning rods. So on the spinning rods, if you get a good like the Berkeley Forward or the Power Pro Super Slick, you want to spend a little bit more money on your braid for your spinning rods because you need that little bit higher quality. The cheaper braid generally is going to be rougher. It doesn't come through the guides as well, and it doesn't cast as good. With a spinning rod, you want that pretty slick, limber braid. So getting that kind of 8-strand, a little bit higher quality, is something that you're probably gonna enjoy a little bit more, and it's worth spending a little bit more money on. But with the spinning rods, I like using like a 15-pound braid. And then I'll do anywhere from a 6 to 10-pound leader for most spinning applications. Like I was getting at with the drop shot, 6 to 8-pound line is what I'm going to use most often there. So I'll do, like I said, my braid leader, and then I'll tie like a 20-foot or so leader. That way, if I break it throughout the day, I don't get to my knot and end up breaking that off. So that works pretty good for me. But other than that, there's a lot that goes into line, and you can really go down that wormhole there. But this is kind of just more or less summing things up and trying to make it simple. So if you have any specific questions, anything like that, just drop the comments down below and I'd be happy to get those answered. This is something, I mean, I could go forever on. I mean, there's plenty of questions to answer, I'm sure. So like I said, drop those comments down below. Other than that, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you find it helpful, and stay tuned for the next one. So make sure and hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.